Good evening and welcome to our webinar, Cyberbullying Prevention with PACER. My name is Angela Sullivan, Medical Project Specialist, and I will be your moderator this evening. This webinar is being provided as part of the Tourette Health and Education Program, a program of the Tourette Association of America in partnership with the CDC. During the webinar, we would be very happy to hear from you and include your voice in the conversation. You may ask questions or share comments using the question panel on the right side of your GoToWebinar player at any time. We will collect your questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I would like to mention that funding for this webinar was made possible by our cooperative agreement with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views expressed by speakers and moderators do not necessarily reflect the official policies of the Department of Health and Human Services, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial practices, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. Before we get started, I want to briefly introduce our speaker this evening, Julie Hertzog. Julie is the director of PACER's National Bullying Prevention Center and a nationally recognized leader on bullying prevention. Since she helped create the center in 2006, she has led the development of its resources, including creating content for its innovative websites, which were designed to engage, educate, and inspire students, parents, educators, and community members. In addition to developing classroom toolkits, curricula, and other educational resources, Julie has helped create nationally recognized initiatives such as PACER's National Bullying Prevention Month, Unity Day, and Run, Walk, Roll Against Bullying. Amongst many other accomplishments, Julie has been with PACER Center since 2000. She holds a master's degree in counseling psychology and is married with 3 children, Laura, David, and Grace. David, who was born with Down syndrome, has been the inspiration for much of her work. I do want to also mention that both the PowerPoint presentation and a handout with all of the resources that Julie is going to be discussing this evening are attached in the handouts portion of the control panel for anyone on here to download as they'd like. So without further ado, please go ahead with your presentation, Julie.
Thank you, Angela, and welcome everyone this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. And Angela, I'm going to ask you, I'm trying to advance my slides, but they're not advancing. So if you could help me out there, either turn over the control or help me advance to the second one.
Sure.
But while we're working that out, I'm going to mention that I'm with an organization called PACER Center, and we are located in Minneapolis. And we are what we would call an advocacy organization for kids with disabilities, primarily helping parents understand what their rights are when they have a child in special education. And our connection to bullying came because students with disabilities are bullied at a much higher rate. And in early 2006, we were noticing that we were getting more and more calls about kids involved in bullying situations. And so at that time, we started our efforts looking at how could we help students with disabilities who were being bullied. And from that time have really expanded our efforts to include all kids. And so that is how we became connected to the topic of bullying prevention. And I've been the director of our National Bullying Prevention Center since that time. Going to advance to the next slide here.
You should be all set to do it now, Julie.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela. Let's see. All right, our agenda this evening, we have about an hour's time here, and we'll try to wrap up within that hour. But part of the most important piece here is, I think, is the education that I would like to provide to everyone. So I have 2 bullets there, Cyberbullying 101, and then the heart and soul of it, which are really ideas for youth and adults. And if we have time, we have a wonderful discussion activity. But if time does not allow for that, I will have a link to also do that using a video on our website as well. And then we'll just close out with some resources and links. And so again, about 60 minutes tonight. And I do want to mention too that this webinar was promoted for parents, for all adults, and for youth. And so when I'm talking, I'm going to be trying to talk to a broad audience here too as well. So there'll be sometimes when I'll be saying things specifically for youth, and there may be other times I'm talking directly to parents. And so I'm going to be going back and forth a little bit, but hopefully it'll make sense for everyone on the call. So I just thought we would just start with a definition of what, for purposes of this presentation, I'm calling offline bullying, but it's really, I've also heard it called traditional bullying. So it's what our classic definition of bullying is. And I will say that there is not a federal definition for bullying. So each state does define it a little bit differently. But in doing a review of all those laws, we came, and these 5 hallmarks are really what defines bullying. And the first is that it needs to be intentional, that it needs to hurt, harm, or humiliate another student, and it's either physical or emotional. And that bullying not only happens at school, but it can happen in the community, and as we are talking about tonight, also online. And the third hallmark is that those who bully have, there's an imbalance of power is what we call it. And so those bullying have more of a social power, which can be like a social status, or, the quote unquote, the kids in the cool group, or those with physical power being much larger in status. But it can also be just a group versus an individual. So it's really about a power dynamic there, and there's an imbalance. And the fourth one is that those targeted have difficulty stopping the behavior. And then this fifth one, it says that the behavior needs to be repeated, though it can also be a one-time incident. And that's especially true with cyberbullying, which I'll get into in a moment here. And I thought I would include this cyberbullying definition, which is posted to stopbullying.gov, which is the federal website that shares all the best practices. In addition to our website, pacer.org/bullying, is another really great resource to use. But I thought they did a nice job here of just defining cyberbullying and the difference between offline bullying. So it's really, cyberbullying becomes about the mechanism that's used. So it can be anything from the cell phone to a computer to a tablet, so using some sort of digital device. And it can happen, I think so often we think it's social media, but it can be on text, apps, gaming, chat rooms, group text, anywhere where people are coming together and interacting. And what is cyberbullying? This definition says sending, posting, or sharing negative, harmful, or false information about someone else. Can be personal and private, which causes embarrassment or humiliation. And they did add this last part here, an important note, and they say some cyberbullying crosses the line into unlawful or criminal behavior. And a lot of that has to do with just the inappropriate sharing of content. And most often that'll include probably some sexual elements, some inappropriate photos or things of that nature. And I think with cyberbullying, again, I'm referring to cyber and online interchangeably, but I think it's important to note, and I put this quote in there, one student shared that all bullying hurts, whether in person or through technology. And I think it goes back to that old statement, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And we know that that statement rationalized that, when somebody's hurt emotionally, that it doesn't have the same amount of pain, but we do know that emotionally bullying hurts. It hurts a lot. But the differences between offline and online are those 6 that I'm going to refer to in that right-hand column there. And the first is that it's persistent. And what does that mean? It's just that technology is accessible 24 hours a day. So bullying doesn't end when kids leave school. It comes home with them, and it can happen, at any time of day. So it's hard to get away from when it's online. The second is that cyberbullying is hard to detect. So while a lot of bullying is very overt, like a push or a shove, you can see that, or damaging someone's belongings. But when it happens through a tablet or your phone, it's much more difficult for adults to know about it, for anyone to know about it other than the person that it's happening to or those who see it. The third one is that cyberbullying can also be done anonymously. So those who are being bullied might not even know who it is that's perpetuating the behavior. And when it is anonymous, it can make it much easier for one child to hurt another and just not even be held accountable at all. The fourth one is that it's capable of reaching a very large audience in a very short amount of time. And I think that this is such a critical difference between offline and online bullying, between cyberbullying and physical bullying, is that information that's shared on the internet obviously can be picked up by others very quickly. It gets passed from one person to another and is hard to stop once it's out there. The fifth one, it's a lot easier to be hurtful to someone when you aren't seeing them face to face. So when you're behind a screen doing something, it's you know, you don't have, you as the person doing the behavior doesn't have the, you're not seeing how the other person is impacted by it. So it's easier to be hurtful. The last one is that cyberbullying can be permanent too, meaning that once something is out there on the internet, it's available to everyone. And it may be out there for a long time, and it can be challenging to completely get that information off of the internet. And so that permanence is really a significant factor. So I'm going to move to our next slide here. Angela, I don't know, my computer is reacting so slow there. There we go. Statistically, I just want to share two stats, and I will say that stats vary a lot. It depends on who's reporting them and sometimes just how even cyberbullying is being defined. But the first one is, these are studies that are done every 2 years. And the first one is from the National Center for Education Statistics and Bureau of Justice. And we always use these same two stats to see how they change from every 2 years. But the first one indicates that among students ages 12 to 18 who reported being bullied at school during the school year, 15% were also bullied online or by text. And the second one indicates that an estimated 14.9% of high school students were electronically bullied in 12 months prior to the survey. But I will say that stats do vary a lot. And my instinct is probably that there's also a lot of underreporting that goes on. And what I wanted to share about cyberbullying too is this was a graphic done by a middle schooler, and I thought it was such an important thing to think about with cyberbullying because a lot of it happens outside of the view of adults. What's also happening too is that it's changing how kids often feel about themselves too. So when you think about the tagline on this, what's bullying look like on the inside? And, you know, this individual is saying fine, because that's so often what you hear from kids, you know, that question, how you doing? Fine. But really they're thinking, you know, they're tired, they're depressed, they're nervous, things are not good. And you can even see the flames coming out from the bottom of the photo as well. So I just thought it was an important reminder to think about, even though we can't see cyberbullying often, it's really impacting our kids in a significant manner. So I'm just going to reiterate 3 points from this section, and I called this one just important points to remember. That first one is understanding the power imbalance. And the power imbalance in cyberbullying really goes back to those 6 issues that I highlighted on the screen. So it can be the permanence, that it's hard to detect, that it's anonymous, that it reaches a large audience, it's easier to be hurtful. And, you know, along with that power imbalance too, that, you know, so much of the bullying with offline bullying needs to be repeated. But I often think if there's one incident with the cyberbullying where there's one post, that post has the power to reach thousands. So I think in the instance of a classic definition of bullying, that really meets that threshold when cyberbullying is involved, because there's just such a capacity to reach so many people quickly. The second one is that technology, kids are getting access to technology earlier and earlier. I think so often we have the perception that cyberbullying doesn't happen until kids are on social media, but bullying can happen in games, gaming. It can happen when kids have that first cell phone and they're texting or using group chats. So it's just an important piece to remember, and especially as students are moving to distance learning and interacting on video conferencing, we need to be cognizant that we need to be looking at this issue for younger and younger audience all the time. And the third important point there is just, and I can't emphasize this enough, and you'll see a couple times in my presentation, that cyberbullying happens outside the view of adults, and plus we don't see the impact. And so just an important point to remember. So with that, I'm going to move on to our next section here, and this one is ideas for youth and adults. And, everybody says, what's one, or you get the question, what's one thing we can do about cyberbullying? And I put this at the forefront. The number one thing we can do is tell an adult. And why is that important? So I'm just going to walk you through a little scenario. So imagine a classroom in which there's a student is just sitting there. Maybe the bell has just rang. They're sitting down in their desk, and they get a text message, and it's from a group of kids saying, with a message, "You're such a loser. Nobody wants you here." So that student, they take their phone out of their pocket, they read it, and then they put it back in their pocket. And unless they tell someone, no adult is going to know what just happened. And there may be a lot of kids that know what happened. And so that tell an adult is such an important piece because two reasons. Kids, peers are going to know about bullying probably long before adults do. And the second one is that most bullying doesn't stop without some sort of adult intervention. So I just want to start out with that universal piece. Tell an adult. If you remember nothing else from this presentation, I want you to take that away, use that as a takeaway. The other thing, and if we have very young students on this presentation, or there's parents of young students, I think one of the things that when we tell kids, quote unquote, tell an adult, but we don't tell them how to do that. And it may sound simplistic, but we developed this poster here that just helps young kids do it, to know what to do, because put yourself in the shoes of a young person. If you've been told to tell an adult, you might be thinking, what's going to change if I tell? Would I be a tattletale if I did that? Kids get that constant message that don't be a tattletale. And then they also think, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. And that's an interesting piece too, that most kids who are bullied, they don't want the other person to necessarily get in trouble. What they want is for it to stop. So these are all very realistic things that kids might be saying. Then we just provide them with a list of who to talk to: parent, teacher, coach, family member, counselor, mentor. And then even gave them some conversation starters there under that, what do you say? And it can be something like, I think someone might be bullying me, or someone I know, will you help me? And we created this because we realized it can be, it's easy advice, it's great advice to give, to tell an adult, but it's also hard to tell an adult about something that's emotional or serious. And so this chart has been very helpful for just sharing kids the mechanism to tell an adult. And then conversely, if for our adults out there, when a child does come to you and tells you that that they're experiencing bullying, I've given here just a few reactions to avoid. And the first one, and I say these because I'm a parent, and some of these have been my instincts in the past too. But I'm going to just tell you what we hear from kids when they do give this advice. And the first one is telling a child to stand up to somebody bullying them. And my response to that is that, when we put the responsibility back in the child's hands to handle the situation, it's just more harmful for them, because it goes back to remember, bullying is about a power imbalance. If they could have stood up to them, they probably would have done it. And so, again, it's much more important to say to them that this is not your fault. We're going to help you figuring this out. The second one, and I think I've said this to my own kids, but telling a child to ignore and avoid the bully. Again, you know, it's such an easy thing to say, but so hard to do in practice, because trust me, if kids could just ignore the person bullying them, they would do it 100% of the time. But ignoring them doesn't make the problem go away. And it's difficult to ignore someone when you have to be in a classroom with them and see them day after day. And the third one, I did a little typo here. It should say take matters into your own hands. And so this is for the parents. You know, try to avoid taking matters into your own hands. And what does that mean? It's that, you know, it's our natural gut response to try and fix the situation and remove our child from harm. You know, sometimes we've heard about parents calling the parents of the student who's bullying, or directly confronting the child who's bullying. And those, I think, you know, we've heard universal that those just don't work out. That response just doesn't take up. It hasn't worked out because it's very emotional. Bullying is a very emotional thing. And so what's best to do is to work through your school for a response. And I did want to add that important note, and I think I've already touched on that, but you know, often the parents want the child to be held accountable, you know, and kids absolutely should be held accountable for their bullying. But I also want to just say that we found many kids don't want anything to happen to the kid who's doing the harm. They simply want the bullying to stop. And so I just think that's an important thing when we're talking to our kids, to recognize that as well. So what do we tell our kids when they come to us and they talk to us about bullying? What are some of those messages that we can give? And we've put up 6, I think, that are universal. And these are, again, great to remember and use your own variation of them when you're talking to youth. But bullying is never your fault. It is not your fault. And I think kids need to hear that, because so much about bullying is taking away your power as a person. And you start believing some of those horrible messages that are being told to you. So you need to actually say bullying is not your fault. Second one is you are not alone, meaning that we as adults are going to be here to help you. It's also never up to youth to stop the bullying, because again, it goes back to that power imbalance. If they could have stopped it on their own, they would have. And we also have found that bullying typically does not stop without the help of an adult. And another message I think is important is bullying happens to a lot of kids, but even though it happens to a lot, it never makes it right. The 5th one there is no one deserves to be bullied. And the 6th one is really the lead into taking action. And it's saying that we're all going to work together to figure this out, because kids who are bullied feel very alone. They need to know that someone is there for them. So specifically, this next slide, you know, talking about cyberbullying. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but the question is, when should we start talking about cyberbullying? And it should be as soon as the child has access to technology. So anywhere where there's kids interacting together online, whether it's gaming, whether it's that first cell phone and they're texting, there needs to be that cyberbullying conversation. And again, I just put some talking points in there for what messages are good to share between parents and kids. You know, it's about parents understanding how important it is for kids to have access to technology, to be able to communicate with their friends by phone and online, you know, especially in the times that we're living in now. You know, technology is a line. It's a way to reach out to the world. The second is that to reinforce that message that you deserve to be safe from bullying online, just like you deserve to be safe at school. So there really should be no distinction. There's not a drawing line. You know, you just deserve to be safe, period. Whether it's at school, in the community, online, there's the right to be safe. And then that third one is, again, it's helping kids recognize that bullying can happen online, and if it's hurting or harming you, it's important to talk about it. So much of bullying is about silence, and when we're silent about bullying and we're not talking about it, when our kids aren't telling us, when we're not giving them advice, that's when bullying really is allowed to perpetuate. So this next one here is just establishing online guidelines. So what are we talking about here? And I like using the analogy that when you think about technology, giving our kids access to technology, it's much like what we do when they go to a mall or a school dance. So say, for example, when our kids go to the mall, we're talking about who they're going, who's going with, who's all going to be in the car on the way to the mall. What are you going to do when you get there? What stores are you allowed to go in? What time are you going to be home? You know, and it's also like what we do with kids with swimming lessons. You know, giving kids immediately wide open access to technology is much like throwing them into the end of a swimming pool. We want to be talking to them about how to handle online situations and not assuming that they know how to deal with all these things that are happening. So our next slide here. So what are some of those things that we can be talking to our kids about? What are some of those action steps for online guidelines? And these are going to vary from parent to parent, from family to family, and these are just a few of the ideas that you can consider, but they're definitely things that are good touch points between parents and kids. The first one is to recognize that no one ever really knows who's on the other end of online communication. You know, we see teens do this all the time to pretend to be somebody else, and you know, maybe texting, maybe they even are using someone else's phone unbeknownst to the other person, and you know, leading someone along by you know, kind of teasing them through texting. The next one is, remember, it's never a good idea to share email or social media account passwords with anyone, even with their best friend. The reason we say that is because someone who is your friend today may not be your friend next week. And do you really want them to have access to your passwords? The third one is decide whether parents will have access to passwords for email accounts, social media, and other technology. Again, that's going to be a family decision, and some of it's going to be based on the age of your child, you know, what you're comfortable with. The other one is, are you going to, as a parent, are you going to be, as a parent, what you can do, and this is especially good for younger kids, is to look through their favorite online accounts together. And you know, I think one of the things that we found is really useful is asking your child, like, how does this social media account work? And they love, you know, kids love being the experts because it kind of flips the tables. But what that does is it opens up a dialogue where they can show you exactly like what they're doing, and then you can talk with them about what does appropriate content look like. The next bullet there is creating a code of conduct, and there's a lot of great conduct contracts out there. There's Cyberbullying Research Center has one, but they're just a great thing to, because you can walk through like what are some of the rules. And such an important one is, how do you use social media, you know, your child, to educate them that they don't humiliate or embarrass other people too. And so it's not only about kids getting cyberbullied, it's also about kids cyberbullying. And this one's really important too, that establishing what happens if your child experiences cyberbullying and they share it with you. So often we hear from kids that they don't tell an adult because they don't want their access to technology to be restricted. Because again, as a parent, your gut instinct is, well, if it's happening on your phone, if I just take your phone away, it won't happen anymore. But unfortunately, the reality is that, you know, number one, even kids don't have a phone, it can continue to happen. And so it's really about, you know, providing education about and having an agreement what's going to happen when you come and talk and say that there's been a cyberbullying situation. The next bullet, if your child demonstrates cyberbullying behavior, this is so important. It's not something to ignore or to think that it's just going to stop. If you know that your child has had a situation in which they have been inappropriate to somebody, you absolutely need to hold them accountable. And it's kind of like the line in the sand. You know, if we allow the kids to cross that line in the sand and there's no consequences, then they're going to cross the line even further the next time. And so, you know, identifying consequences that you feel are appropriate for the situation is very important. And I've added in this last bullet because this is, and I'll read it out here, discuss what parents can and cannot share about their kids on their own social media. And I think this has been true more in the past, you know, 5 years, because as our kids, you know, it's great to share stories about our kids, but as they grow up, they may not necessarily want you to do that. They're thinking about their own digital footprint. They're thinking about how they want others to perceive them. And so a lot of kids will, you know, ask that their parents, you know, talk with them before they post pictures. So just food for thought there. And I thought that that was an interesting one that even within, it's only come up within the last couple of years that people have been thinking about that. So what happens when there is a bullying situation? What is one tool that you can use to talk, you know, have kids talk through the situation and plan? And being an advocacy organization, what we've put together is what we call a student action plan against bullying. So we first initially put this together for kids, for students to fill out themselves, to really think through a bullying situation and what they could do to stop it. And so it's a great tool for kids to put their thoughts down on paper and to also share with adults what's happening. But what happens with this too is that it also helps develop some potential solutions to a situation. And so just a very tangible, it's a document on our website, and I think Angela is also going to share the link to it. But the first step in this is just sharing, describing your own, describing what the experience is. And, you know, this we have in written format, but you could also verbally talk to somebody about that. And then the second step in the student action plan is just thinking through, reflecting on what are your ideas. So consider, you know, we ask kids to consider how the situation could be different. Include like what you'd like to see happen, how things could be changed, and, you know, get some ideas about how kids can feel back in control over the situation. And then the third is just developing potential solutions. So it's thinking about the steps needed to make the changes happen. And so, you know, considering what the student role might be, what steps they need to take, but really think about who else needs to be involved, what they would need to do. And so it's a way for kids to take control of the take control in a situation which might feel out of control. And again, I want to say that it's never up to kids to stop a bullying situation, but it's also equally important to involve them in the solution. So by asking for their feedback, this is such an important piece. And this student action plan just gives a very tangible way to do that. And to accompany that for parents, we also gave a guide just how to use that. And so, you know, there's quick 4 steps there, but it's you know, be looking at the plan on your own so that you kind of understand what you know, what advice your child is given. And then also, if you're working with your child to fill it out, whether it's a teacher and a student or a parent and a child, but it just offers a way to have conversation and dialogue. And like I said earlier, some kids actually write down their responses. It's just easier for them to say it out loud. And also, and know that, you know, when you're talking about bullying, it's very emotional. It's emotional for kids, it's emotional for adults. And so we just provide prompts with each of the steps too, and just to advise you to be patient with how kids tell their story. But this storytelling piece is an important part of just taking action. This next slide here is, so in addition to that self-advocacy piece, you can take action right online. If you're being cyberbullied, here's 4 things that you can do as a young person or a parent working with a child. You can untag yourself from the post or the photo. You also have the ability to unfriend or block the person who's doing it. And most social media sites, you know, sometimes you can do this without the other person even knowing. There's also a social reporting tool where you can contact the person directly and say this, you know, I want this content taken down. And most importantly, you can report the content. And most sites now have mechanisms to remove that. And I will say that social media has moved very far forward in the handling bullying situations. The other piece I want to just point out too is that with offline bullying, so much of it is very covert. It's hard to quantify. But the ironic thing about cyberbullying is that it does leave tangible evidence. And so that documentation becomes really important because it's a piece that you can use to validate what's happening. And so, you know, we say absolutely save what's happening. Take screenshots of emails, text messages, posts, website pages, photos. You know, if you don't want to save it on your phone, print it out as necessary, but try to avoid deleting anything until you've made a copy of it so that it can, you know, so you can document what's happening in case you have to talk to the school or you need to talk to the service provider or you need to talk to police in some situations. But just that documentation piece is really critical. And again, with cyberbullying, it's all right there on your phones. So the other thing I want to just talk about too is working with the school. So we know that cyberbullying isn't necessarily happening at school. That's probably more often happening off of school hours or off school grounds or outside of school hours. But it's also been recognized that cyberbullying has such a negative impact. And so absolutely be talking with a school about online behaviors. And these are just some action steps for working with a school. I won't go through them really in depth, but you want to be making sure that you're providing that documentation, that you're working collaboratively with educators. And then just like that action plan is determining the action steps. You know, what are we going to do? Who's going to be responsible for the actions? I put the plan in writing, even if it's 3 or 4 bullets, but just so you know that, you know, we discussed this is the situation, this is who involved, this is what we're going to do. And so working with the school is absolutely important. And specifically, I added this site for social networking because they do have such great, you know, strong mechanisms for cyberbullying now. So look at their their safety page. There's always great ideas on there. Report the cyberbullying to the social networking sites. Oftentimes you do get a direct response to that. Be sure to document, and you know, if you choose to, be sure to block the person who is cyberbullying. And so technology providers, whatever platform it's happening on, make sure that you're checking that. So I included this slide here too, distance learning. And I know that you can't see these images, but we did create 3 posters just to talk about the relationship between COVID-19, distance learning, and cyberbullying. And so these are 3 posters. One is for elementary school students, the second is for middle and high school students, and the third is for parents. And I'll just use the elementary school students as an example, but basically we lay out what distance learning is. And then we talk about when using technology, we say it's important to feel safe, be respectful, know what to do if you or see or are cyberbullied. And then we give some tips about what to do. And so these posters, again, Angela's going to put a link to them, but these are very helpful. And, you know, and I know that schools have them posted as well, but they're just a snapshot into what to do if you're being cyberbullied while doing distance learning. And I will say too that distance learning, because it's relatively new, that I think we oftentimes will get the question, you know, is bullying happening, is cyberbullying happening more frequently now than it was a year ago? And I don't have the data to respond to that, but I will respond just anecdotally that there's obviously much more of the opportunity to bully. And so I just put some bullets in here to think about, like, if you are distance learning and you've just spent the school day online, how much screen time do you want outside of school? I think that's a good thing for parents and children to be talking to each other about. But the other thing is we're just hearing about, you know, because video conferencing does bring a whole audience, quote unquote, inside your home. You know, how do you feel about your background visuals, your noise levels? You know, what can you do to make your space feel more comfortable and feel more like you? And I think that that's something that, again, kids and parents, it's a great place to have a conversation, because we hear about kids being bullied because of their backgrounds or, you know, people walking around. And so just something to absolutely be thinking about. And this is another one too. If someone is being, that should say inappropriate to you online during school, what should you do? And again, a conversation there, and that might even be something for parents to be talking to teachers about, like, how are we handling this now if there's something inappropriate while on distance learning. The other thing is too that there's, you know, kids are in chat rooms online a lot more during class time than they were before too. And so these are just things that, you know, I don't necessarily have action steps for them, but they're things that we just need to be thinking about as we move forward with distance learning here and having conversations. So this next one, I just wanted to touch on cyberbullying laws, because as I mentioned earlier, every state has a different law. But I will say the majority of the state laws do address cyberbullying. And that's just because of the relationship between offline and online bullying. Most kids who are bullied offline, you know, if they're being bullied online, it's probably happening offline as well. And so at stopbullying.gov, there's this wonderful interactive map where you can look up your own state law to see what your state laws have. And you can also just go to, most of the time, to your school websites, because most state laws require that schools have their policies online as well. And I did want to touch on this as well, the cyberbullying of protected classes. And when we talk about protected classes, those include students, it's race, color, religion, sex, age, disability, and natural origin. So while there's not a federal law about bullying, there is a federal law for harassment. And the distinction between bullying and harassment is when the bullying is based on the status of their protected class. So again, you know, say for example, my son with Down syndrome, if he was being teased because of his disability, then that behavior does reach the threshold of a harassment. And I like to bring that up because in those situations, you do have more protections. So it's an important piece to know. And if you want to get into more depth on that too, again, all of these slides, we have more information on our website about, you know, that if you want to dig in a little deeper into it. So when kids, when youth with cyberbullying, when youth are cyberbullying, we, as far as just language too, I would like to just mention that our preference with language, we feel that language is very powerful. And so even when we talk about bullying, we don't call a child a bully, we say child who bullies. It's because we feel that bullying is about behavior and that behavior can be changed. And, you know, and oftentimes we want to look at why kids are cyberbullying. Could it be peer pressure? Are they being bullied themselves? Do they not realize their actions have on another child? And so one of the first things, you know, action steps when you do find out that your child is bullying, or again, when a teacher finds out a child is bullying, you want to find out the reasons for their behavior. And I think sometimes those conversations are very enlightening. But you want to find out how they're feeling, You know, is this happening because they're being bullied by someone else? But what is it that's leading up to the behavior? And then that next one is, again, you know, find opportunities to provide, you know, to teach empathy, respect, and compassion. But it's so important, again, and I mentioned this earlier, but there needs to be consequences when someone bullies. And again, you know, a lot of times kids will bully or cyberbully just to see what happens. And so it needs, those expectations and consequences need to be clear. And also, you know, be patient with the child if it's happening, because it takes a while to change behavior, but it's worth all the efforts to do so. And then on the flip side to that, you know, just a lot of times kids are going to be tested by negative messages. And so some of the advice is just think before you post, you know, take that pause, take that breather. Give yourself some time to cool down and don't do anything in this, you know, in the heat of the moment. And then also don't publicly reveal anything that you wouldn't be comfortable knowing. And so, again, those two pieces of advice. And again, it's about pausing and thinking and not doing things impulsively. Will save a lot of cyberbullying situations. This next slide, and again, it goes back to that tell an adult, because oftentimes it's going to be peers themselves who are aware of bullying long before adults do. And youth are such a powerful, peer intervention is such a powerful piece here. Because there's a stat out there that bullying, over 60% of bullying situations will stop when a peer intervenes. And so peer-to-peer support is critically important. But it's not easy to do. And so it's one of those things. I want to give a few action steps about what kids can do when they witness cyberbullying. So this is for the kids out there, but it's also for parents to talk, you know, give ideas to them as well. And the first one is, this is more of a don't participate or engage. So don't like or share the posts that something's happening, because you know, if you do that, that's just your agreement. That's your assent that the bullying is okay, and it gives power back to the person bullying. The second one is report it. And so you can report it online, you can report it to an adult. You know, again, it goes back to that tell an adult, and, you know, get some, you can help by getting support. The third one is, and I love this one, is just respond with positive support. And you can send a public message, you know, basically saying something positive. Like if everyone else is saying, we don't want you here, you can say, you know, I don't agree. I'm glad that you're at our school. You can say that publicly, or you can say that in a private message. But, you know, that one voice out of, whether it's one voice out of 100, it's powerful when someone shows that kindness. And I know we had some kids on a panel last night who said that they did that and it made them feel so good. So the person doing that action felt so good. You know, that last one is along the same lines. You know, you can send them a private message that you don't agree with the bullying. They don't deserve it. They're not alone, and you don't agree with what everyone else is saying. And so that really, that support piece is powerful. And this is a little chart. It's hard to read. It's small, but I'll just try to give some of the takeaways from it. It was a research project done with 13,000 students, and I thought it was enlightening to just say that the kids can help students who are bullied by, number one, spending time with the student who's being bullied. You know, spending time, it can be a minute or it could be a half hour, but just acknowledging them. The second one, trying to get the student away from the situation, again, removing them, and this is more offline than cyberbullying, but getting them away from the situation. And the third one, being there as someone to listen. You know, maybe the person who's being bullied, this is the first time that they've talked about it. And a peer listening is really powerful. And that last one, just saying again, it's not your fault, you didn't deserve it, when it comes from someone your own age, is even more powerful than having an adult tell you that. So again, peer-to-peer support, it's important and vital. So again, I want to just recap some of the important points to remember. Bullying, it happens outside the view of adults, and so the way that you're going to get it to stop, either if you see it or if it's happening to you, tell an adult. And for adults out there, just keep in mind those steps about when someone does come to you with bullying, what you can do. The second one is that bullying leaves that evidence trail, and so it's the ironic part of cyberbullying. As awful as it is, it does give that tangible evidence of what's happening. And that's just an important piece to have when you're going to a school, or when you're trying to report it, or when you're talking to people in authority. That third one, the importance of those who witness it. So the peers, again, you're going to see bullying happen long before any adults know about it. And so can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to be speaking out about it and telling someone. And you can do that anonymously too. 4, we're in the world of distance learning right now. So I think we just need to be thinking through this topic more than ever now. So we're at a time of 5 minutes, and I do have a little discussion activity. I think we'll just do one of these. I did have 3, and what we're going to do is I'm going to just share one scenario, and then I'm going to share 5 potential solutions to it, and you'll have the opportunity as an audience to share how you would respond to it. And then once we get the poll back, I'll do a little bit of recap of the situation. But what we did is we call these "What should you do?" And we took some actual situations, and these are written from the point of view of young people. So for the adults out there, put yourself in the role of a young person. But I'm going to read this first one. So you and your friends are walking down the hallway at school. Without noticing, you accidentally bump into someone. You apologize to that person and keep walking. When you get home from school, you get a text message from a number you don't know saying, "Hey, you're stupid. You bumped in the wrong person. You better watch your back." You realize it's the student from school today that you accidentally ran into. You respond to the person saying, "Sorry, hey, it was an accident. I didn't mean to run into you." The person texts back with more negative comments about you. You ask them to stop, but it continues. So what should you do? And here's just 5 options. And I think Angela's going to launch a poll where you'll be able to just pick which option you would choose. But the first option is do nothing, hope that the individual stops posting about you. 2, message all your friends, tell them this person is such a dramatic and such a loser. 3, respond to the post by saying you're messing with the wrong person. 4, document the post, block the person from accessing you, and think through who else should be involved. And I always put in a 5 other. We won't have a way for you to share your other ideas, and so maybe just respond with, we usually do this live, and so we'd use it as a talking exercise, so it's a little different online. So maybe just choose one of those first 4. And Angela, I don't know if you've launched the poll yet or not.
Nope, I'm going to go ahead and launch it now. So those of you in the audience, the poll will pop up on your screen, and you can have the option to choose 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Angela, does the screen go off when the poll comes up like that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Because I still see the PowerPoint that I can see people taking the survey. So
okay, because I thought it would be helpful to still be able to see the scenario and their responses too. But we'll do it this way.
I think that just about, we'll give everyone a few more seconds. If you haven't voted, feel free to go ahead and do so. Alrighty, it looks like 82% of the audience has chosen option 4.
All right, awesome. Can we go back to the PowerPoint? Okay, let's see. Will you go back to the slide with a scenario on it?
Yep.
So I think it's the slide 37.
Yep, can you see it now?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
So I just want to read option 4 is document the post, block the person from accessing you, and think through who else should be involved. And, you know, I think in the ideal world, that is absolutely what you should do. Again, the option 1 is do nothing and hope that the individual stops posting about you. I would say you've already asked the person to stop and they haven't. And so, you know, it's likely that this behavior is going to continue. Option 2 was message all your friends, tell them this person is so dramatic and such a loser. You know, if you do that option, what you're doing is just adding fuel to the fire, and you yourself is infringing on some bullying behavior as well. And so the third one is respond to the post by saying you're messing with the wrong person. Again, you know, that you're going to be adding fuel to the fire by responding that way. And so involving, you know, documenting, blocking them, and then again, tell an adult, because this person obviously wants this, they want to continue the behavior. They're doing this intentionally. You know, they're on a mission. And so I know we're at the close to the top of the hour, but let's do one more here. So we'll go to, and I like doing these because they just give a nice way to integrate what we learned this evening. And Angela, I don't know if I have screen control or not. Okay.
I'll take it for you.
Okay,
Alrighty.
so we'll go to 39. All
Perfect.
right. So this one, again, same process here. The story is, while you are online one day, you see some of your friends posting hurtful comments and rumors about someone from your school. It makes you feel upset to see your friends being mean online. You also don't want to ruin your friendship, but you also don't want to see them cyberbullying others. What should you do? So again, we're going to give those first 4 options. Option 1, ignore your friends' comments. They'll probably stop on their own. Option 2, your relationships with your friends is really important, so you add in your own negative comments. Option 3, send the person being bullied a message of solidarity and let them know you don't agree with what's happening. Option 4, don't participate in your friends' online behavior, sharing or commenting. If you're comfortable, send a private message to your friends saying it's not okay to spread false rumors online. So again, 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll now. Give everyone a few more seconds. Alrighty, just a few more seconds, everybody. Alrighty, it looks like 75% of people chose option 4 again.
All right, let's put the scene back up. All right, let's go to the options. So again, with this one, I think this is an interesting one because it's, again, these were based on real situations. And one of the things that struck me about this is that, you know, these are your friends, and it's not so easy to go against your friends. And you know, there's so much pressure, there's so much peer pressure to all be the same. And so option 1 is obviously the one that I think a lot of people default to, because especially if it's just the first time that it's happening. So, you know, even with these, I think absolutely the right thing to do is either option 3 or option 4. But again, sometimes it's going to depend on, is this the first time that your friends have done this? But also you want to be thinking about what kind of friends do you want? And so the interesting thing about these scenarios is that we called them, what should you do, not what would you do? Because in real life world, sometimes what we would do is different than what we should do. And it's also important to be gentle on yourself. But we present these as just thinking about how complex cyberbullying really can be and how nuanced it is. And because so much of it is about emotions and about relationships. And so, you know, it's all just important stuff to be thinking about. So I'm going to just close with a few resources this evening, and on our next slide here, I think it's slide 43, 44. I know I went through a tremendous amount of information tonight, but I just wanted to kind of touch on a lot of pieces to be considering when we're thinking about this whole topic of cyberbullying. And if you want to take a deeper look at any of this, we have 3 websites. The first one there is for parents and professionals. We have a site specifically for middle and high school students called PACER Teens Against Bullying, and a third called PACER Kids Against Bullying. All age appropriate, all have information specific to bullying as well as cyberbullying. And then this last slide here, the next slide just has a list of resources that I think Angela will be providing those links to everybody as well. But on our within our websites too, we have a lot of specific resources, many of which we covered this evening. And so all those links there will be active in the PowerPoint. And then I want to just close with, we also have a little online check your knowledge. So there's 10 questions on there, just kind of a fun piece that Angela will share a link to that you'll be able to take after the presentation tonight. So again, I went through a lot of information. Just really appreciate everybody being part of the webinar this evening. I also want to thank our partners at Tourette Association of America. We have partnered, I think it's maybe 15 years. And so it's been a long, wonderful relationship, and we really value everything you do. So I will close with that. But again, our website, pacer.org/bullying, would really encourage you to go there, and especially to check out the cyber module within the site.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie, for such an excellent presentation, and again, for being such a great partner with us for the past multiple years. So we are now going to begin answering any questions that were submitted during the presentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to submit them through the question panel on the question section on the control panel. If we are unable to get to everyone's questions, or if you don't have any questions tonight and you'd like to reach out to us about anything that comes up after the fact, we do have a full-time information and referral staff who would be more than happy to answer your questions. You can email us at support@tourette.org or give us a call at 1-888-4-TOURETTE. So we'll see if any questions come through. If not, if no one out there has any questions, then again, you can always reach out to us and we can get those to Julie and she can answer them offline. So we'll see if anyone has any questions. All right, it doesn't look like anyone really has any questions tonight. So thank you again for such a wonderful presentation. You gave a lot of great resources and steps for both children and adults. In the handouts section on the control panel for everyone out there, you can download the PowerPoint presentation, and you can download a PDF that has all of the links to the resources on the previous slide that Julie mentioned. So that's all downloadable. And if you don't get a chance to download them and you need them, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to email those to you. So that is all the time that we have for our webinar tonight. Once the webinar is closed, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we'd be very appreciative if you wouldn't mind taking a few moments and complete that and provide your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of the webinar. Additionally, the webinar will be posted on the TAA's YouTube channel for those who are unable to participate today. We encourage you to reach out to us about this webinar or for any other ideas and suggestions you may have. On behalf of the Tourette Association, thank you again for joining us and taking the time to view our presentation. Thank you so much again, Julie, and have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.